sending to you this message from this house laboratory in orbit around Earth, where I've been living and working for the last months for the Italian Space Agency's mission Vita. This is my third space mission, and living and working on the space station, I witness every day firsthand all the elements that make this a global human effort. Science, technology, knowledge, researchers, engineers, technicians, people, industries, countries. This is really humanity's home away from home. Space has often been called the final frontier, but the truth is that there are many final frontiers, as there are many incredible explorers in the field of science and technology, from healthcare innovation to artificial intelligence. Explorers that every day edge our knowledge a bit further. Do you know what I think is the real purpose of a frontier? To show us where to go and dare us to go there. So I would urge you to dream up your frontier and then wake up and dare to go there. I believe that the most important things that anyone can do in its lifetime, whether it is aspiring to join us here in space or working on any impossible dream, is to constantly strive to go further. Explore without fear or failure, because failure is unavoidable when breaking barriers. Learn from mistakes, throw them aside and continue stronger, and keep pushing further and further. Impossible dreams do happen. Rarely, but they do happen. Just wake up and start working on it. Enjoy the summit.
Paolo said it better than I ever could, so let's get to it. For our next panel, I'd love to introduce, in conversation with ReCode co-founder Kara Swisher, in conversation with astronaut Mike Massimino, and European Space Agency engineer turned AI expert. Thanks.
Thank you. This is great. Just so by way of background, I'm going to have them explain what they do, but I talk about space a lot because a lot of internet people I cover, that's all they want to do. And by way of talking about it, we did an interview with Elon Musk just relatively recently, and we were asking about he talks about space a lot, he obviously owns SpaceX. And I said, what do you want to do around Mars? And he goes, well, I want to die on Mars, just not on landing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great response. They talk a lot about it. There's a lot of money going into it from internet people, for sure. But why don't you each talk about what you do, and then we'll get into the discussion of where we're going with AI, space, and the technologies.
Sure. I'm Mike, hello. And I was an astronaut with NASA for 18 years. I flew twice on the space shuttle to the Hubble Space Telescope, was a spacewalker on those missions, and now I am on the faculty at Columbia, and I'm also an advisor at the Intrepid Museum in New York City.
I'm Nuno, Sebastiao. I was at the European Space Agency. Unfortunately, I did not make it to the space station, but I was running simulations there on the operations center. And after that, I started this company called Feedzai, where we're pushing boundaries using machine learning, but what I call for a do-good cause, which in our case is to detect fraud in payments and financial services.
All right. So let's talk about where we are with space travel, because I think, obviously NASA's been around forever. It's got a sort of this storied history. But I think a lot of the shift is moving to the privatization of space and also travel to space. Yeah. First with just payloads and satellites and things like that as a business with companies like SpaceX and others. And then the idea that there will be regular passengers to space, to parts of space, and then eventual colonization of places like Mars. I think that's the goal, colonization of Mars. In addition, like different investors like Yuri Milner, who's been in the news recently, wants to send nano rockets into space and things like that. So talk about where we are right now and what the challenges are, Mike.
I think we're at a very exciting time, Kara, and I'm very hopeful that the next decade, the decade in front of us, is going to be very exciting for space travel because, as you said, it's not just NASA or ESA or the Japanese Space Agency or China or whoever is interested in doing it as a government agency, it's now also these private companies. And that's done a lot, I think, to inspire some of the young people. The students that I have at Columbia, when they graduate and they want to get involved with the space program, they can still go to NASA or a big aerospace contractor, but they also like to go to places like Blue Origin or SpaceX or Virgin Galactic, or some of these smaller companies. You mentioned Yuri Milner, who's got these incredible ideas, and it's entrepreneurial, it's exciting, and it's not just the big government agencies anymore. So I still think the government's going to have a role. I think that NASA's building a big rocket ship called the Space Launch System and a spaceship that goes on top called Orion, and hopefully that'll be going in a few years. But I think maybe the more exciting thing is how now we have these entrepreneurs, these private companies that can go to space, maybe with a little help from the government, but also on their own, for tourism, for mining resources, and as you said, for hopefully establishing a base.
I forgot about mining. That's another.
Yeah, I think we're going to the moon first. I think that's a very realizable objective, and I don't necessarily think that's going to delay us going to Mars. I think going to the moon and settling there, mining those resources, having tourism on the moon, I think that is I think that's the next step. We'll see what happens, and then from there go to Mars.
I mean, the way I see it is quite simple. I mean, if you think about the internet, right? I mean, it was a huge government spend to develop it, and then the entrepreneurs came and made what we have today. So I totally believe the same will happen. The governments, both Europeans, Chinese, Americans, they'll pave the way. But what will happen is a bunch of entrepreneurs, Elon Musk being one, us being other, and others will build on top of it. And right now, I mean, the last 5 years, you see the number of startups that are building nanosatellites to send up there for all sorts of different purposes. The number of startups that have now the funding to do that, that wasn't there 15 years ago. Right. And if I would draw an analogy, the same is going to happen in this boundary of human knowledge as it has happened for internet, as an example.
So talk about that idea of the government not being involved, because the government did invent the internet, and then all the value was not captured by the government, but by people like Jeff Bezos or Larry Page or whatever. They got all the billions, not the government, which had spent the money on it in the first place. Yeah. But space is slightly different because it's a different. Well, it isn't, but it's more. Should it be abrogated by government? Because it seems like the excitement around space travel is not there in the way it was. Or maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems as if it's moved drastically elsewhere.
I think things have changed. I'm old enough to remember Neil Armstrong on the moon. Right. And that's what inspired me. That was I was only 6 years old, but I can clearly remember that. And I always thought, well, it takes something like that to get people excited. But I'm not so sure. If you look at, as an example, the astronaut applications in the last set of, the last class we just selected, the prior class we had about 6,000 applications. We thought that was a lot. The most recent class, there was 18,000 applications. They only picked 12 people. So that's unfortunate we couldn't select more. But I still think there's interest. This is what I think the difference is the social media aspect of it, the access through the internet, through social media. I happen to be the first astronaut to tweet from space, but all my colleagues since do that. They've done Instagram. You see Paolo's able to send us a message. So I think people can engage with it on a more of a personal level. Right. So I still think the interest is there. And it's a little bit different in that it's not just the big government project anymore, but it's a way to be entrepreneurial. And what they have accomplished is amazing. You said 15 years ago. I remember getting briefs about what they were doing 10, 15 years ago in the astronaut office, and I thought, there's no way they're going to be able to do what they've done. Right. And they've been doing it. Just amazing. And the private companies. And the government, I think, has done that investment. Governments around the world have done this investment to create the technology, the spacecraft that we've needed. And I think we're at this point now. And space is a little different, I think, because you're worried about killing people. You don't want that to happen. And so like making the skepticism on trusting the technology might be there a bit. But they've proven themselves to be trusted, and they deliver on what they're saying. So I think they're very credible. The private companies are. I think it's going to be very exciting in the next 10 years.
So what are the big challenges? I mean, obviously, again, we're talking about there's mining, which is a huge thing. There's a lot of efforts in that because it could be very lucrative for a lot of people. There's travel, there's tourism, as you said. there's just intelligence or communications or put satellites and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think the biggest challenge is
I would
going
put it-
forward in this next phase?
I would put it as follows. If you think about other boundaries that we pushed, so in the 15th century, the explorers were going out there. They wanted to trade. If you think about the internet, people wanted to communicate. I think the big theme in space is people want to get other places other than Earth for risk management of if this blows up or whatever. But the point is that's the overarching theme. Now, what will happen as a consequence of that? Frankly, I don't know, and I think it's early to tell. People will. What I think is important is if people have access, if entrepreneurs have access, if people have access, they will figure it out, and probably it will not be what we think it is, travel or mining or whatever it is. It will be other use cases. Quite frankly, I don't have enough foresight to tell you it's going to be this use case. The same way people didn't have with the internet.
I mean, what do you imagine it'll be? Because it could be almost anything. Like you said, the other day, a startup was trying to sell me on the idea of moon TV. They had a way to use the moon as a screen. And I thought that was terrifying. And then I thought Coke commercials. They'll put a Coke commercial on the moon that you can see from the Earth.
Yeah.
So that's horrible. That's a horrible idea, and they should not be allowed to do it. That doesn't mean they won't be allowed to do it. So where does the private-public thing, who is responsible? And you can equate it to traveling to America on all those trips.
Yeah.
But
I think, if I was to guess or imagine, I think some of the things you mentioned are absolutely correct. There's going to be those who go there to mine the resources of a place like the moon or an asteroid or
there's
Mars.
like 4 of those,
Yeah, try to make money off it. Then I think there's going to be people who are interested in going there for the experience, the tourism element of it. But I still think you're going to have that research governmental interest there. I think there's reasons to go scientifically to the moon, and that's where the government would be most interested, I think. Trying to find out how did we get here. The formation of the moon will teach us more about the formation of our solar system, of the universe. There's maybe clues there to where we came from, how this all came about. It can be a scientific platform, similar to like maybe on a larger scale, hopefully, than what we have on the South Pole. People raced there at the beginning of the 20th century to get there, and then 50 years later, they settled with a scientific station. I think hopefully that's what's going to happen on the moon.
Now it's melting, so that won't be long, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So now it's a whole different stuff. That's a whole different issue.
So sorry.
But I think that the governments are going to be interested as well for prestige. The Chinese have had a plan for over a decade of going to the moon. Prestige for the technology that would be there as well. And there may be military applications. That's not pleasant to think about, but there might be motivation there as well.
That's all it's about, and a lot of.
I think that's I don't know if that's all of it, but that certainly could be an element of it. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a combination of these driving factors. But an interesting thing that Nuno said here is that we really don't know. We built the Hubble Space Telescope. They were looking for things like black holes. They found them. They were looking for planets in other solar systems. They found them. But there were also things that we couldn't even imagine, like dark energy, dark matter. Couldn't even think of that question. So it may be this thing that we find in these other places as we go to these go to the moon, Mars, and beyond. We're going to find things we can't even imagine.
Imagine this. 5 years ago, people were debating if there was water on Mars or not. Now it's a given. It's a fact. 10 years from now, we could be talking about terraforming Mars. We don't know. But now there's water there. It's probably in enough quantity. Is it possible to start some sort of terraforming experiences? Can we build an atmosphere? We don't know. But can we explore it? That would be cool.
Yeah.
For the better of mankind, right? So that would be an interesting aspirational. And if I would be a government, that's the aspiration. Not about to go there and then die there. That's irrelevant. It's go
you
there.
Probably will die there if you
probably
go there.
will. Probably some people will.
You're going to die there.
We're all going to die anyway.
I'm certain you're not coming back.
We don't know.
No, you're not.
Probably not
you.
me.
Not
but
you.
My grandchildren, probably.
Not you.
Not me, that's for sure.
That's true. If you go there, you're staying there pretty much. But do you, we only have just a few minutes, but what do you think the most exciting one of these things is, and sort of the time? Is it space tourism to the moon for a vacation, or what is the most exciting application you think it's going to be in the next 5 years, 10 years?
Well, for me personally, it is the idea of tourism. I want to go back as a tourist.
Right.
I want to go back and I want to complain about the service.
Oh.
That's what I really want to do. 'Cause when you're an astronaut, you try to look out the window. Paolo got to do this little thing. He's got something else to do a minute later.
Yeah.
You know?
You just want to relax.
I want to go there, relax, and really enjoy. I did get to enjoy it, my space trips.
What would you enjoy?
But I think that what would you enjoy?
It's super dusty.
Yeah. No, the house. Yeah, have someone else do the. No, but even the cleaning is interesting. You had to do all the chores. But what I'm most excited. Do I what?
You want to have a maid on the moon, but go ahead.
I would be the maid on the moon.
Right.
I would volunteer for that.
All right,
I would be okay with that.
What do you want to do?
The experience, I think that there are some practical things like we've talked about, the mining, the research, of course. But I think for most people, just the experience of getting there, it's so extraordinary. The experience I had.
The trip.
Of the preparation of going and then seeing our planet is life-changing. It is. It is amazing. It's like looking into a paradise. And the appreciation I have now for this planet, and maybe I should have had it anyway, but you go and see it and how beautiful it is. And then you turn your head into the darkness and you realize there's no other options out there for a very long time. For a long way. I looked around the neighborhood. There's no place else we can get to. We're here. We have to take care of our planet. It is so beautiful, and that's how I spent my time, was looking out the window and enjoying the environment I was in.
So how long before there's space, that kind of, like a visit to the moon? I don't know, a Hilton on the moon.
I think the moon is realizable. I think, for example, Mars, when I became an astronaut, on our class patch, which I'm not wearing, we had Mars on our class patch, because we thought someone from my astronaut class was going to Mars. That's not happening. But that has been what every astronaut class has thought for the past few decades, and it just keeps getting pushed off and pushed off. I think the moon is a little more realizable, and I do think that that's a place we can get to.
I'm going to push you for a year.
Okay, so I'm going to make a really stupid prediction here, I guess, because predictions are always dumb. But I think in 20 years we can have people back on the moon, but functioning as a research station, a tourist location,
20 years.
and a place for research.
And Mars?
I believe that. Mars, I think, is a bit further. I think you're probably looking a little bit beyond that, maybe 20 to 30 years. Except if Elon Musk can figure out a way to get there, and he wants to go there relatively soon, like in the next year or two, I wouldn't put it past that guy, because they've already amazed me. All those space companies, all those entrepreneurs have amazed me. So they may get there before anybody else does.
Right. And you?
To me, there's three layers. One is there's still so many things we can do just with immediate stuff. There's still so many things we can do on communications, satellite communications and whatnot. Whether looking at our own Earth, that are, from an economic standpoint, right there. I mean, all the satellites are being sent out there today just to look at Earth, not to look outside, to look inwards and understand climate change and whatnot. There's real money to be made there. There's so many startups working on mapping technology and whatnot.
And the low ones.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's, it's immediate. There's an ROI. It's there. Then there's the intermediate stuff. It's kind of like, I'll put it somewhere between the moon and Mars. It's kind of like, let's get this. We know how to get there. There's a path to get there. It's just a question of execution. And there's and that will happen in the next 20, 30 years, as Mike was saying. And then there's the further stuff. The let's go crazy. Let's go grab a satellite or a rocket and send it to grab a comet 10 years from now. That was done once. Can it be done twice? Look at the Voyagers. I mean, those things were launched in the 70s, and we're still talking about them today. So that's what can we do there? Where can we go? But that's centuries down the line.
All right, and then spaceships further. How long?
To go beyond Mars. Again, I hope it's a stupid prediction, but I'm thinking to send people beyond Mars. I think we're looking more in the order of more decades, beyond 50 years. But if these entrepreneurial companies can get involved, governments are restricted in what they can do, obviously. We have only so much tax money to spend, and some of these things are going to be beyond what I think a government can do. So if these entrepreneurial companies can go and get going, they may be able to shrink that time.
To the moon.
What's that?
Uber to the moon?
Uber to the moon would be the way some way to get there. We need a better way to travel. The moon is within our reach. It's only a day and a half away conventionally.
All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the stage will now break for lunch. Content will resume in 45 minutes. Please make sure to arrive in time to secure seating.